Hey everyone, this is Simone Watson. I already made a video earlier today, but this is something that was just pressing on my mind and I was like, okay, let me make a video about it. Um, so as you can probably tell, I'm African American, and as you may know, my main character from Red Letter Law, Lonnie, is African American as well. Um, I I think I have felt some pressure recently because there's so much talk about own voices and diversity and, whether people should stay in their lane or not. And sometimes people talk about like cultural markers and cultural nuances. And I felt a little bit of pressure at some point because I was like, this is weird, right? But I'm going to explain it. I wondered if Lonnie was black enough. Okay. In other words, I didn't know whether I had conveyed the cultural nuances well enough. Okay. Then just now, I was in a group discussion on Goodreads. I am not calling out or condemning anybody. Okay. I'm not, condemning anybody. This is just what happened in the group. Somebody made a post in the group about the stay in your lane idea, which is right in your own culture, and some arguments for it. And somebody made a post that said, you forget about how many minorities, African Americans, they said a couple of other groups, but African Americans stood out to me. They said you forget how many minorities are not immersed in their culture because they live in the suburbs instead of in the ghetto or such and such a place. And I was like, okay, this really rubbed me the wrong way. And I'm pretty sure this person was not trying to be rude or to offend anyone, but I'm going to try to explain this the best that I can. I grew up in the suburbs. Okay. I have relatives who did not, and I've seen TV, I've seen movies, I've seen music videos. I have seen this idea kind of perpetuated that you have to live in a certain place, act a certain way, dress a certain way, talk a certain way in order to be black or to prove your blackness. That like you're not as valid as a black person if you didn't grow up in a certain way. Okay? And I understand that a lot of times people are not trying to perpetuate this idea. But I just wanted to kind of put it out there that after reading this post, I have realized like I am African American. I don't have to prove that to somebody. Okay? And I feel like my experience as an African American is just as valid as that of somebody that didn't grow up in the suburbs, that of somebody that grew up, I don't know, in a poorer neighborhood, in a big city, somebody that grew up out in the country, somebody that grew up wherever you grew up. Like, it doesn't make say you're African American. It doesn't make your experience less valid than someone else's because your experience is different from someone else's. Okay? This is like somebody said this on Twitter about Drake, and it was a very good point. Drake was saying in some post or in some interview or something that he didn't experience racism growing up in Canada. And a lot of people were like, what is he talking about? There's no racism in Canada. What is he saying? And some people were like, oh, there must not be. Some people might have thought, oh, there must not be racism in Canada. But this person on Twitter said, just because that's his experience doesn't necessarily mean that that's everyone's experience. So that doesn't render his experience invalid, nor does it render everyone else's experience invalid. Like, it's just different. Okay? So I think that it is important to note this, and I think it's important to note that I've realized now on this thought process that I don't have to try to make my character black. I don't have to try to specifically insert cultural nuances because I'm writing her, she's based on she's kind of like based on like my own experiences. My experiences have shaped her naturally, and it's not something that I have to specifically do or like make her talk a certain way to prove that she is black. Okay? Certain things about African American culture I've noticed in this book. Now here's another thing is we have to try and separate African American culture from African American stereotypes. They are two different things. So yeah, let's just okay. So, but one thing that happens a lot in our culture, in African American culture, is code switching. That doesn't mean that everyone does it. Anything that's in the culture, that doesn't mean that everyone does it. I'm just saying it is a part of the culture in general. So a lot of people do it. Code switching, the technical definition of code switching is when you are at least bilingual, so you switch from one language to another. But people also have used the term code switching to mean that you switch from one dialect to another. Okay. Another thing I have to emphasize, I'm not trying to be preachy, you guys. Okay. Dialect and intelligence have nothing to do with each other. Okay, so if I'm speaking a certain way with my family and I'm speaking a different way when I'm at school or like making a speech or like whatever I'm doing, that doesn't mean that I'm less intelligent, you know, when I'm with my family. Like dialect and intelligence, those are not even in the same part of your brain. So I'm just going to leave that there. But anyway, code switching is something that happens. I code switch. I switch codes. This is not me doing something on purpose. This is something that just like happens when I go to, for example, to visit my mom's family, my mom's side of the family. They live in a like a rural part of Florida. A lot of people don't think that there's such a thing as a Floridian Southern accent, but there is. So a lot of them, they talk in a way that is Florida Southern. And yes, it is an African American dialect. When I go there, I naturally start speaking in that dialect. It's not something that's like, oh, I have to try and do that. It's just something that happens. Like I said, not all African Americans code switch. Not all people of any culture code switch. But it's just, yeah. Other things about our culture that I can mention really quickly. African Americans, from my experience, tend to value resourcefulness. And there are a lot of cultures that value resourcefulness. That's another thing. It can apply to other cultures too. We tend to value resourcefulness and practicality as well. So sometimes, like, I've heard people joke about how like putting your dog in your purse is something that like only white people do, or like putting a sweater on your dog. This doesn't mean black people never put a sweater on their dogs. It just means that is generally not considered practical. So that's generally not valued so much in African American society. And correct me if I'm wrong, or if you had a different, you know, viewpoint or experience with this. I'm not saying it never happens. I'm just saying it's not typical. So yeah, resourcefulness, practicality. We tend to value the way we look, which again, everybody, but specifically hair. Okay, for African American women, we tend to value the way that our hair looks. We tend to put a lot of effort into that and take pride in that. This is one that I, you know, personally kind of struggle with, because I often do not give a lot of thought to my hair. That probably sounds bad, but I often am just like, I mean, it probably doesn't sound bad. I often am just like put my hair in a ponytail and go, you know. So you can do that in spite of being in this culture. But yeah, so there are other nuances in there, but I'm just saying there are a lot of things, there are a lot of cultural nuances that I don't have to specifically try to write, nor do I have to specifically try to live them in order to prove my blackness. Okay, so if you have any thoughts on this topic, I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic, and I may even make like a part 2 to this video. But it's just something that, like, I'm glad I came to this realization that I don't have to put that kind of pressure on myself. But I just kind of wanted to put this out there because it's a little bit frustrating to me. Any concept of having to prove your blackness is just very frustrating to me. So yeah, I would love to hear what you guys think about that. And thank you so much for watching. And if you want to subscribe, you know where to click. Okay, bye.